This marks the fourth part of the third season of this manhwa. If you haven't viewed the previous seasons, you can access it by clicking the I button located above, or the link is provided in description. Let's aim for 200 likes on today's video. To show your support, consider subscribing to the channel. Let's begin our recap video for today's manhwa. The next day, Dell informed Han that he was going to request a transfer to another squad. Han and Dell stared at each other for a moment before Han spoke, expressing surprise and saying that he thought they had gotten along well during their operation. Han added that he wouldn't try to stop Dell, but asked if the transfer request was because of the bar fight. Dell became angry and denied it, stating that the reason was that they were not a good fit as teammates. Dell explained that Han saw the squad members as people to be protected, while Dell wanted a comrade, not a guard. Han responded that as a leader, it was his duty to protect his squad members. Dell finished his drink, turned the can upside down, and told Han to shut up, claiming he wasn't as eloquent. With that, Dell walked away. Han stayed silent and watched Dell leave without saying anything. Later, Han informed Knut that Dell had transferred to the Red Squad. Knut was surprised, noting that the Red Squad was led by Jose, who had recently started avoiding them. He asked Han if he was affected by this, but Han just looked saddened and remembered a time when they were on an island for survival training. Back then, Jose had invited them to his house after the war, reminiscing about his mother's excellent cooking and wondering if they would like Spanish food. In the present, Han told Knut that Jose probably had his reasons and that they should be patient until he was ready to explain. Meanwhile, John, sitting alone in his office, lit a cigar with his combustion ability and thought about Oracle and her comment that the old him would have granted her request. John pondered over Oracle's remark about the old him. He wondered what he used to be like and then retrieved a drawer full of pictures, selecting one of Oracle. He reminisced about the time the photo was taken, where a fellow soldier had informed him that her name was Katherine Sammy, an American who had come to Sabrin for travel but ended up leading survivors and sending distress signals during a minion attack. John was amazed and asked how she managed it while the minions were everywhere. His comrade explained that Katherine claimed to foresee the future and only went to safe places. Later, John and Katherine stood together, gazing at the ocean. She casually asked him to light her cigarette, and John used his combustion ability to do so. Watching her smoke, he found her cute and chuckled. Katherine inquired about his laughter, to which John replied that smokers weren't his type. She teased him, saying he wasn't her type either, and they shared a laugh together. After reminiscing about their earlier conversation, John and Katherine continued to gaze at the ocean. A while later, Katherine asked John what he wanted to do once the war ended. John replied simply that he wanted to get discharged, expressing his weariness of the ongoing conflict. Katherine agreed, acknowledging how tired they both were of the war. Then, Katherine proposed a plan to John. She suggested they go to Texas together and open a barbecue shop. She revealed that her grandfather had given her the recipe for his secret sauce, and she believed John's combustion ability would be useful for cooking. Katherine playfully suggested a profit split where she would take 70% and John 30%. John laughed and jokingly flipped the terms, suggesting he should take 70% instead. Katherine teased him, calling him a thief, and John thought about walking hand in hand towards their future together. In the present moment, John looked at the picture of Katherine, Johnny, and himself, reflecting on those memories. When Johnny set up the camera and jokingly commented on its condition, remarking that it still seemed to work despite being junk, he then gathered Katherine and John, instructing them to smile as he positioned himself alongside them in front of the camera. Upon seeing the photo on the camera's screen, Johnny teasingly chided John for not smiling. John, however, questioned the purpose of taking the photo in the first place. Johnny explained that they were nearing the end of their journey, and it was important to capture memories like this in a photograph. John pondered this notion, thinking about the impending end of the war and the fact that only the seventh dragon remained. He glanced at Katherine and quietly desired a simple, ordinary life for their future together. Johnny interrupted his thoughts by suggesting they go for a smoke and offered them cigarettes. John declined, mentioning he had quit, and Katherine echoed the same. Frustrated, Johnny kicked a stone on the ground and walked away, muttering that he would go by himself. In present, John's watch beeped, reminding him of a scheduled meeting. Later, in the meeting room, Alexander LeCory directed his question to Dr. Sasha regarding Oracle's condition. Sasha somberly reported that if Oracle experienced another seizure, her body might not withstand it, a fact Oracle seemed to understand herself. John's expression darkened upon hearing this, while Alexander LeCory deeply pondered the implications. He then stood up abruptly, suggesting they cryopreserve Oracle one last time, emphasizing her irreplaceable skill and the necessity of keeping her alive. The engineers and doctors in the room grew nervous at the proposal. Alexander continued, proposing that Oracle use her ability one last time during the final battle. John, in response, recalled a moment from the end of the First War when he excitedly ran to Katherine's room to share news of their victory over the last dragon. However, upon entering, he found Katherine sitting on the floor in distress, screaming. Concerned, John asked Katherine what had happened. She trembled and cried as she turned to him, expressing disbelief and anguish. Upon seeing Katherine's distressed state, John hurried to her side, urgently asking her to explain what she had seen. Katherine tearfully revealed that the recent victory wasn't the end instead, it was merely a test. She foresaw that in 15 years, their humanity would face true annihilation. In the present, remembering this chilling prophecy, John stood up abruptly during the meeting with Alexander LeCory. He challenged LeCory's decision to treat Oracle merely as a tool during her final moments, expressing his frustration. LeCory, offended by John's accusation, retorted sharply. Enraged by the situation, John turned away and left the meeting room. Observing John's anger, Alexander LeCory instructed John's fellow sergeants to keep a close watch on him. Later that night, John visited the lab where Smith, working on his robotic leg, informed him that the repairs were complete. Noting the leg's good condition, Smith remarked on John not being deployed into recent battles. John joked back, asking if Smith also felt left out at times. Smith laughed and bantered with John about advancements and applications. Before leaving, John acknowledged that he needed to depart. Smith expressed concern, asking John if he was truly all right with Oracle's fate, emphasizing that this decision would be final. He looked at John with a worried expression, suggesting that John might regret not intervening for the rest of his life. John, however, responded calmly, stating that he had already made decisions he would regret forever. Smith sighed, clearly troubled, and moved away momentarily. He then turned back towards John, grabbing a cloth that covered something nearby. Smith explained that they were supposed to demolish it but instead had repaired it enough to make it usable again. Pulling away the cloth, Smith revealed the first-generation psycho frame of John. This revelation stunned John, causing a cold sweat to break out on his face as he stared at the unexpected sight. Smith expressed doubts about the effectiveness of cryopreserving Oracle, noting her current condition might prevent her from awakening. Despite the slim chance, Alexander LeCory was willing to take the risk. Smith argued that Oracle had already saved countless lives and, even if terminally ill, deserved happiness. He instructed John to retrieve Oracle and meet him at the 4th hangar, where he would prepare the psycho frame and a cargo plane. John, determined, donned a cap and began making his way towards Katherine's room. However, someone approached him from behind, addressing him as Sergeant Red and questioning his late-night movements. John heard the voice behind him and immediately suspected it was Han. He silently cursed Alexander for assigning the most annoying person to surveil him. Turning to face Han, John retorted that he was just taking a walk. Han pointed out the inconsistency by indicating a military cap that John rarely wore. John, annoyed, accused Han of being arrogant and knowing the real reason for his presence. Tensions escalated quickly, and both men instinctively assumed fighting stances. Han, however, maintained his composure and thought that John's actions must have a calculated purpose. He conceded that there must be a reason for everything happening. Han then asked John about his plan. Confused, John questioned Han's knowledge, asking what he meant. Han, maintaining his calm demeanor, inquired if John had a way to leave Ark after retrieving Oracle. Surprised by Han's unexpected question, John questioned Han's role, asking if he was assigned to surveil him. Han clarified that he was there under Oracle's orders to assist, not spy on John. John demanded a clear answer from Han, asking if he willingly accepted surveillance duties. Han calmly replied that he had already taken care of John's surveillance. Angrily, John called out Han's name again, pressing for a proper explanation of his motives. Han explained that he had made a deal. In exchange for helping John escape, he would receive a crucial data file containing information about Ark. Han suggested they first visit Oracle, noting that she was likely under surveillance too. Later, outside the building where Oracle was located, Han guided John, pointing out the specific window on the second floor where Oracle could be found. He planned to enter through the third window from the right, which lacked security and was closest to an emergency exit. Meanwhile, John contemplated Han's motives with suspicion. He thought about Han's strategic use of blind spots in the surveillance system to navigate them to Oracle's location undetected. John couldn't shake the feeling that Han was preparing to confront Ark as an adversary, plotting something against Ark. Han noticed John's thoughts and acknowledged him, addressing John as Sergeant and suggesting that John could understand why he had gone to such lengths. Han then quoted their instructor, Lauka, stating that being prepared for the unexpected ensured survival. Upon hearing this, John remarked sarcastically that Han was clinging to Lauka's teachings and expressed incredulity at how far Han was willing to go. He commented that no matter how chaotic the world became, Han seemed destined to survive. Inside the building, Han observed for rotating guards and advised John to wait momentarily. Han noted that only 2 guards were present at a time, suggesting that Ark hadn't considered the possibility of Sergeant John Red betraying them. He concluded that Ark remained vulnerable to internal threats. Han swiftly approached the guards, extending his golden glove hand. John, watching in disbelief, wondered if Han would use the glove against people. Meanwhile, Han approached the guards directly. Unnoticed by them, he utilized the glove's electricity to incapacitate both guards, causing them to collapse unconscious to the ground. John hurried over to check on them, asking if they were all right. Han reassured John, explaining that he had adjusted the power of the glove to merely knock them out. He mentioned having experimented with the energy levels on Cut earlier to determine the right intensity. Later, at the 4th hangar, Han assisted John in entering the first-generation psycho frame. Before departing, Katherine handed Han a flash drive, thanking him and asking him to take care of himself. John, unexpectedly grateful, thanked Han as well. As they prepared to board the cargo plane, Katherine inquired about its availability. John explained that a pilot had offered to assist, though it might seem like he had coerced the pilot into helping. As John was about to leave, Han asked if he had any last words of advice. John turned around and admitted he wasn't sure what to say, acknowledging Han's greater experience in slaying dragons. He advised Han not to suppress his emotions too much, emphasizing that no one should fault him for showing his human side. Han, gripping the machine tightly, angrily retorted that such advice was impractical. He reminded John that their harshest instructor taught them that showing weakness could be fatal. Han declared his refusal to accept such advice, expressing his frustration. John, noticing Han's anger, sighed and realized it might be Han's way of showing how upset he was. He then wished Han good luck. Katherine and John boarded the cargo aircraft, which began moving out of the 4th hangar. As John departed, Han's memories with him flashed before his eyes. He solemnly said, "Farewell, Sergeant Red." The next day in the cafeteria, soldiers gossiped about John, calling him a son of a bitch and mocking his actions, attributing them to a romantic entanglement. They expressed disbelief that someone considered a war hero had betrayed them for a girl, revealing unexpected sentimentality. Knut, overhearing the conversations, turned to Dmitri and noted that everyone was talking about John. Dmitri agreed, criticizing John for running away during a critical time and calling it pathetic. He found it strange that higher-ups were so quiet about the escape, pointing out that John couldn't have done it alone and questioning their lack of action in finding the accomplices. Meanwhile, Han recalled what happened after he helped John and Katherine escape. He returned to his room and checked the flash drive Katherine had given him, expecting crucial information about Ark. Instead, he found only a message from Katherine. In it, she apologized and explained that providing the information would put John in danger. A few weeks later, John is seen carrying a deer he hunted and placing it in the back of his car before heading to the nearest town to sell it. After making the sale, he returns to the house where Katherine is waiting. She greets him by noting his lateness and asking if he managed to sell the game. John confirms and mentions he bought groceries for dinner. Later, they sit down for dinner. Katherine playfully suggests they drink their soup in one shot. John, amused by her randomness, advises her to drink it slowly. As they eat, John reflects on his decision to betray everyone just to see Katherine smile again, feeling no regret. Meanwhile, Han is in his room, contemplating the message Katherine left on the flash drive. He senses that the message has a deeper meaning and wonders if she is implying that something significant is going to happen. At the same time, a soldier reports to Alexander Lacouri about the complete annihilation of some squads. Alexander Lacouri, in shock, asked if 2 of the first-gen psyker squads were annihilated by mere minions. Soldier confirmed this, adding that 1 member survived, but was unconscious despite not being injured, and was currently being treated in a private ward. Lacouri decided to see the situation for himself and proceeded to the private ward with the soldier. As they moved, Lacouri pondered the timing of these events, noting that they coincided with John Red's disappearance. He acknowledged the importance of the first generation, even though the second generation was their main force. Upon arriving at the private ward, the soldier opened the door, and both he and Lacouri were surprised by the person they saw inside. The person was one of second-generation soldier that survived. He suddenly pulled out a gun and fired, killing the soldier and severing Alexander Lacour's left arm. As Lacouri reeled in pain and shock, the assailant moved behind him, ready to fire again. Before he could, Han intervened, decapitating the attacker with a spear. Lacouri, surprised to see Han, asked how he got there. Han urged Lacouri to leave quickly, warning that the danger wasn't over yet. Lacouri turned to see red psychic energy emanating from the dead attacker's nose and mouth. Recognizing it as a spectre, Han repeated the urgency, insisting Lacouri move immediately. As Alexander Lacouri moved away, he told Han he would request backup. Han insisted against it, explaining that the spectre steals bodies and that he would handle it alone. The spectre then emerged from the dead soldier's body. Han, realizing he hadn't had enough time to prepare, wondered how to defeat the spectre. When the spectre tried to enter his body, Han understood that physical attacks wouldn't work and that he had to battle it mentally. He opened his mouth, allowing the spectre to enter and began the mental battle. Meanwhile, John was chopping firewood while Katherine watched him through the window. After a while, Katherine, feeling bored, called out to John, asking him to come back inside. John responded to Katherine, saying that he needed to prepare firewood to prevent them from freezing. Katherine teased, suggesting they could warm each other with their bodies instead. John remarked that she had changed a lot. Later that night, they sat outside their house, gazing at the sky. Katherine commented on the beauty and peace, despite the world's impending end. John asked if she was keeping her promise not to use her ability again. She smiled and assured him she was. John thought about how, according to the numbers, she couldn't survive another seizure. He noted that she seemed healthy since she wasn't using her ability, but remained aware of the ever-present risk. John's thoughts were interrupted by Katherine calling his name. Smiling, she said she was hungry, which startled John. He replied that she scared him and suggested they go inside to cook something. Katherine agreed and asked why he was scared, but John brushed it off, saying it was nothing. At Ark, Han regained consciousness in a hospital bed after battling the Spectre. He then went to Alexander LeCorey's office, knocked on the door, and entered. LeCorey asked Han to take a seat and requested his report on how he defeated the Spectre. Han explained that during his physical enhancement, he gained resistance to psychic abilities. It was unprecedented for a psyker's body to reject psychic powers, but his body reacted the same way even against specters, which are composed of psychic energy. When the Spectre entered his body to possess it, it ended up destroying itself within him. Alexander LeCorey asked Han if that was all, and Han confirmed it. Suspicious, LeCorey dismissed him, thinking that Han must be hiding something. He recalled a previous report stating that the Spectre was expelled due to Han's body's reaction, not destroyed, and mused that if John Red were present, things might be different. As Han left the room, he looked at his hand, pondering the events of the previous day. He remembered the fight with the Spectre. When he extended his hand, the Spectre screamed, exploded, and disappeared, which surprised him. In the present, Han wondered how he accomplished that. He considered that the total psychic energy he gained from the reinforcement was only enough to control the psycho frame, leading him to train his psychic energy with precision, considering it his special ability. However, he now thought that perhaps his real ability was something more significant. 6 months later, John returns home early to find Katherine standing in the doorway. She informs him that he can't come in yet and tells him to go buy some salt. Confused, John questions the urgency of the situation, but Katherine explains that she spilled the salt and needs it for the boiling soup. Reluctantly, John heads to the nearby village to purchase the salt. However, as he steps out of the car, he realizes his left mechanical leg is stuck due to lax maintenance. As he moves through the crowd, his unusual gait, caused by a malfunctioning mechanical left leg, draws the attention of onlookers. Despite this, he continues on his path and eventually enters KTD Mart in search of salt. Upon locating the salt shelf, he decides that the salt bottle he finds will suffice for now. Just as he picks up the bottle, a person approaches him. Reacting swiftly, John knocks the person to the ground and delivers a hard punch. He then restrains the individual and accuses the person of following him ever since he got out of the car, despite his efforts to take a longer, more convoluted route. Pointing a gun at the person, John demands to know their identity. The person, now terrified and sweating profusely, begins to stammer, saying him to wait. At the moment, 3 more individuals surround John, pointing their guns at him and ordering him to put down his weapon. John complies, putting his hands behind his head and questioning why they would be interested in someone like him. Suddenly, Alexander LeCorey arrives, stating they are in a worst-case scenario and need John's help. John recognizes him as Chief and asks why he has come. As they converse, John noticed something and abruptly ran off, calling Katherine's name in concern. The soldiers try to stop him, but Alexander allows him to leave, deciding to track him instead. Alexander wonders if Katherine is the Oracle and is surprised she is still alive. As John drives his car back home, the Ark soldier's vehicle tails closely behind. Fearing for Katherine's safety, John accelerates even more. Meanwhile, Katherine sits writing a letter, expressing her remorse. Forgive her for being so selfish. A brief moment together with him meant more to her than the future of humanity. She loved him, and that will never change. Caught in the grip of panic, John's speeding car loses traction on the snowy road, careening off a hillside. The impact leaves his car smoking and himself severely injured. Despite his injuries, John manages to crawl out of the wrecked vehicle, driven by concern for Katherine. Arriving at his house shortly afterward, John bursts through the door to find Katherine lying on the floor, surrounded by a halo of psychic energy. Alexander Quarry, accompanied by the soldiers of Ark, arrives at John's house where they discuss their next steps, deciding to wait for the time being. Meanwhile, John, overwhelmed with emotion, lifts Katherine from the ground and breaks down in tears. The following day, the Ark soldiers and Alexander remain outside, still in a state of waiting. Inside, John prepares soup and consumes it hastily from the plate without using a spoon. Afterward, he washes his face and shaves his beard, then showers and dresses in his uniform. He then goes to the bed where Katherine's lifeless body lies. After bidding farewell to Katherine, John exits the house and uses his ability to ignite a fire inside, reflecting on his desire to join her soon, but acknowledging he still hasn't finished business. He expresses his love and asks her to wait a little longer for him. The next day, Alpha Squad is aboard a cargo aircraft, where Knut questions how Sergeant Red returned to duty despite his recent absence. Han explains that Red was on sick leave, prompting Knut to dismiss it as a trivial matter given the urgent tasks at Ark. Han prepares Alpha Squad for descent, and they deploy assault pods to the ground, encountering a large group of minions waiting for them. Han explains that psycho frames have been mass-produced over the past year, making defeat by dragons due to firepower shortages inconceivable. Meanwhile, Alpha Squad engages in combat with a dragon, successfully defeating it with Kuro's abilities and no casualties. After landing, Kuro shows signs of exhaustion and nausea, prompting Knut to check on him. They discuss their fatigue from being awake for 2 days straight, concerned it might affect them before the final battle. Han reflects on the relentless schedule they face, realizing it's a significant issue. Suddenly, they hear assault pods deploying nearby, revealing Omega Squad arriving to handle a new threat at the gate, grabbing everyone's attention. Kuro questions if Omega Squad was dispatched again to block the gate. Knut criticizes the higher-ups for overworking them, noting that they may not care if Omega Squad members die, given their previous revolt. Han reflects on how they are treated as expendable. His thoughts are interrupted by a message from the local network, prompting him to identify himself as Alpha One. The leader of Omega Squad contacts Han, requesting backup. Han hesitates, noting that it's beyond their usual duties, and asks if Omega Squad can handle it independently. Omega One, leader of Omega Squad, informs Han Alpha One that they are unable to simultaneously eliminate both dragons threatening them. Han suggests contacting the higher-ups for backup to handle the situation. Omega One responds skeptically, questioning Han's suggestion, indicating a lack of faith in the effectiveness of seeking higher-up assistance. Observing Han's concern and gaze towards the gate where Omega Squad is engaged, Knut queries him about the situation. Han explains that Omega Squad has requested backup, and he intends for himself and Silence to go assist with Omega Squad mission. Meanwhile, Omega Squad successfully eliminates the dragon on their own. Han and Silence make their way towards Omega Squad to assist in defeating the dragon. Along the way, they encounter minions, but Han directs Silence to ignore them and focus on reaching their objective. They use jump packs to navigate airborne, encountering 2 ogres attacking them. Han instructs Silence to handle one ogre while he deals with the other. Silence swiftly dispatches the first ogre using his blade and blink ability, while Han engages and kills the second ogre with his spear. Upon reaching the location where Omega Squad had already defeated the dragon, Han remarks that the situation seems resolved. Omega One acknowledges their arrival, commending Han for making it to their location. He expresses pleasure in meeting both Han and Silence. Han questions Omega One, asking if they lied to lure Alpha Squad to their location. Omega One denies this, claiming they genuinely needed help, but Alpha Squad arrived too late to assist effectively. Han counters, mentioning that piercing the dragon's core temporarily disrupts nearby communications, indicating Omega One's deception. Omega One admits Han's observation and acknowledges his poor lying skills, suggesting an honest conversation. Han probes further, asking if Omega 1 plans another revolt despite their previous failure. Omega 1 concedes their past attempt was flawed but implies they may try again. Han remains skeptical, remarking that their situation hasn't improved much since their previous revolt. Omega 1 explains that their survival is due to ARC's shortage of manpower, suggesting that ARC may not guarantee their survival after the war ends. He questions Han about his own future after the war, emphasizing the need for psykers to unite for survival. Omega 1 justifies his actions as motivated by self-preservation and protecting his comrades, similar to their previous revolt. Han challenges Omega 1's stance, questioning his loyalty to his comrades given past betrayals and killings among their own ranks. He condemns Omega 1 as a murderer. Omega 1 explains to Han and Silence that during the past events, many of their comrades lost their sanity. He claims that he tried to escape with those who were still rational, including Silence, who was gradually succumbing to the same fate. Omega 1 states that Silence had begged him to end her suffering by killing her. Han, taken aback by this revelation, questions Omega 1 about Silence's play. Meanwhile, Silence struggles with conflicting memories and doubts about whether she truly asked for such a thing. Observing Silence's uncertainty, Han becomes concerned that she might be influenced by Omega 1's narrative. He realizes that the situation could tip in Omega Squad's favor. Han dismisses Omega 1's claims as lies and warns Silence not to believe him. Omega 1 challenges Han's statement, implying it's unlike Han to make such unfounded accusations. Before Omega 1 can finish his sentence, Silence swiftly places his blade at Omega 1's neck, causing Omega 1 to realize that Silence trusts Han completely. In response to Silence's action, other members of Omega Squad aim their weapons at Silence. However, Omega 1 intervenes and instructs his teammates to stand down, diffusing the tense situation. Omega 1 then declares that their conversation concludes for now, expressing anticipation for their next encounter with Han. After the tense encounter, Han asserts that winning the war takes priority over everything else, including internal conflicts and future uncertainties. He and Silence then return to their squad, leaving Omega 1 contemplating Han's resilience and the challenge of influencing him. The following day, at an underground testing ground, Kuro stands in an arena. Octo addresses Kuro, asking if he is ready. Alexander LaCorey questions Octo about the purpose of testing Kuro, noting that Kuro lacks a psycho frame and wondering what Octo intends to do with him. Octo activates the large numbers of cannons, which begin firing at Kuro. Alexander LaCorey reacts with shock, demanding an immediate halt to the testing. However, Kuro uses his psychic abilities to successfully block the cannon fire. Octo then explains to Alexander LaCorey and John that Kuro, through his experiences in real battles, has developed the ability to fully utilize his S-rank psychic abilities. By concentrating his psychic energy, Kuro can effectively defend against physical attacks without relying on a psycho frame. After demonstrating his ability to destroy the cannons with ease using his psychic powers, Octo praises Kuro's abilities, noting that he surpassed mere telekinesis. Octo suggests that Kuro's power could allow him to casually navigate battlefield conditions. Alexander LaCorey, visibly shaken by Kuro's display of power, expresses and refers to Kuro as a monster. He reflects on how Kuro's abilities validate the success of the ARC project and signify a significant achievement for humanity. Meanwhile, John expresses concern over Kuro's immense power, questioning whether such a young and emotionally sensitive individual can responsibly handle such overwhelming abilities. This marks the conclusion of the fourth part of the third season of this manhwa. The fifth part of the third season will be uploaded soon. To show your support for the channel and help speed up the release of recaps for your favorite manhwa, please consider subscribing to the channel. Looking forward to seeing you in the next video.